this Monday. I'm trying to identify who we have in the way of board members. Looks like maybe we need to defer for a couple minutes. Ms. Stoner?
Mr. Chairman, we have 7 trustees that have joined us.
Okay.
Morning, Ms. Stoner. I don't know if you saw me. I just joined.
Thank you, Trustee. Thank you. Trustee Stewart has also just joined.
Very good. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We'll do our level best to be efficient, given that it's Monday morning, and I'm sure there is plenty for folks to do to get ready for this busy forthcoming week. So I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. It's 10:01 a.m., April 15, 2024. And this is, I'm going to call it a special meeting, but a meeting of the full Board of Trustees that has been duly noticed as state law requires. So I want to go ahead and call the meeting to order and turn to our University Secretary, Ms. Stoner, to call the roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Delaware State University's Special Board of Trustees meeting today, Monday, April the 15th, 2024. Trustees is chaired by Leroy Tice. Joining us today from the Board of Trustees are Vice Chair Debbie Harrington, Vice Chair John Allen, Trustee Norman Griffiths, Trustee Jocelyn Stewart, Trustee Bernadette Dorsey Watley, Trustee Dr. Wilma Michoud, Trustee William Collick, and Trustee Marlene Saunders. Have I missed any other trustees that have joined? I think I have them all. So we have a total of 9 trustees who have joined us this morning. So we do have a quorum. Also joining us today is our president, Dr. Tony Allen, and members of the Administrative Council, Dr. Irene Hawkins, Mr. Anas Benatti, Dr. Vita Pickram, Dr. Stacy Downing, Ms. Lucretia Moultrie, Ms. Jackie Griffith, and Mr. Daryl McMillan. We also have from Administrative Council, Dr. Dawn Mosley, Superintendent James Overton,
Ms. Stoner, I'm on my phone.
Madam Provost, Dr. Sandra DeLauder, thank you. Mr. Antonio Boyle. Okay, we also have Trustee John Ridgway, who has also joined us as well. I'll go through the list of other attendees. We also have Dr. Alicia Gadsden. Okay. Other attendees joining us today, Mr. Thompson, Daniel Thompson, Ms. Dawn Davis, Ms. Sarah Green. We have Mr. Tony Tucker and Ms. Ursula Harvey. That completes our roll call for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stoner. Turning next to public comment. Is there anyone that is signed up properly and is present?
Mr. Chairman, we did have one person requesting a public comment, but she has not joined us at this time.
Okay, we'll put a pin in that. In case she does join, we'll give her the opportunity. Turning to the board committees, Academic and Student Success Committee, and I believe I see our Vice Chair, Debbie Harrington.
I am here. Good morning, Mr. Chair.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning. I have 2 items that we need to approve. We were not able to conduct this at the committee level, so we are bringing it directly to the board, but the board has had time to review it. The first item is the approval of the degree candidates for summer 2023 and fall 2023, and potential graduates for spring 2024. So we have a total of 1,029 potential graduates. In the School of Graduate and Adult Extended Studies, 207, Agriculture, Science, and Technology, 153, College of Business, 249, Wesley College Health and Behavioral Sciences, 219, College of Humanities, Education, and Social Sciences, 201. So those are we're not making this recommendation from the committee level, although I'm bringing it before the board because we didn't review it at the committee level. But I am asking that the board approve this. I am recommending that the board approve this list of graduates.
Okay,
Mr. Chair, I
yes,
move that the board approve conferral of the appropriate degree in respective fields, subject to clearance by the university registrar.
well said, Dr. Michoud. Second,
Second.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
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 My hand is up.
Aye.
Yeah, yep. Sorry
Okay.
about that.
I'm not able to see you. Please speak, because I don't, let me see here if I can bring the full screen up.
This is Dr. Saunders. I was waiting for the question.
Oh, I'm sorry. You did not appear on my screen. Let me change the layout on my
Okay.
screen, dear.
All right.
Yes, ma'am.
Uh,
Yes, ma'am.
Dr.
Okay.
Michoud's second partially took care of the issue I was going to raise. She said pending review by the registrar. Does that include pending review by student accounts to ensure that all students who walk across the stage are financially sound?
It
So that
is.
we don't have students graduating who have outstanding bills.
Yeah, it is, and we can certainly let Tony Boyle answer this in more detail, but the registrar does review the list prior to it coming to us, and then they review it again to confirm all of those as we get closer to graduation. But Tony, if you would let Dr. Marlene Saunders know the process, I would appreciate it.
Good morning, trustees. All students' academic records, we do the academic protocol first to where they met the requirements for the degree. And that's what's coming before the board. Once that's approved, secondarily, then they go through a review for their financial obligation to the institution by term. That's for the summer of 22, fall of 2023, excuse me, and summer 23 and spring of 2024 before they are cleared to graduate. So this first process is just about the academic clearance and the review thereof. And then secondarily, they're taken through this student accounts protocol beyond that.
So no student who is in the group of students we are approving will receive a diploma with an outstanding bill.
No, ma'am. They will not receive a transcript and or their diploma.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Saunders. Dr. Saunders, does that prompt anything else from you?
No, it does not. Thank you, sir.
Okay. By the way, I cannot see everyone. If anybody has a question, please get my attention. Okay. Very good.
Chairman,
Yes, sir.
can I follow up on Dr. Saunders' question?
Please,
Hey,
sir.
Tony, if a student is on a payment plan, are all those payment plans designed to end upon commencement date and the walking across the stage? I mean, are there still payments extended out beyond that date, whatever the commencement date is? Or do all payment plans, if a student is on a payment plan, do they end right at that date, that time? And in answer to Dr. Saunders' question, everything's paid up.
The two protocols, a person is on a plan of whatever kind you may have until they pay to zero. If zero coincides with graduation, that answer is yes. If it does not, it continues beyond graduation until they pay us. They are meeting the academic requirement is one side, the financial obligations is the other, but no one crosses the stage unless they meet the academic requirement first and financially cleared and sound to do such.
Thank you, Doctor.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate it.
Does that prompt any further questions? Okay, let's take the vote again. So there's been a motion. There's a motion pending. It's been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any against? I don't hear from anyone. Do I? All right, the motion carries. The degree candidates motion carries. Thank you. Dr.
Thank you,
Harrington.
thank you, Mr. Chair. The second one is the honorary doctorate in humane letters. And because this is for Mr. Andrew Holmes, Prime Minister of Jamaica, and Mr. Calvin Butler, President and CEO of Exelon. But because it did not come directly to us, it's coming from the honorary degree committee. I'm going to ask that Dr. Delata speak to how these two meet our policies for administering the honorary doctorate in humane letters.
Morning. The honorary degree committee is a faculty senate committee. We had faculty representing all colleges and 2 students, 1 undergraduate and 1 graduate student on the honorary degree committee this year. The selection committee, as noted in the application here, for Mr. Andrew Holness, Prime Minister of Jamaica, as well as Mr. Calvin Butler, and their biographies are noted in the application packet, along with the memoranda to me for both candidates from the honorary degree committee. And so the recommendation to move forward with both candidates for the honorary doctorate of humane letters to be presented at commencement was the recommendation from the committee for both applicants. For both candidates.
Yeah.
That is the process.
Does that prompt any questions from any of the board? Okay. So a motion is required.
Yeah, since there are no questions, Mr. Chair, I make the motion that we approve the 2 honorary degree recommendations for Mr. Calvin Butler and Prime Minister Andrew Holmes. Yes, thank you, Andrew Holmes.
Second by John.
All in favor?
Allen.
Signify by saying aye.
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 Any against? Guess I should ask any abstentions. Hearing none, the motion carries. Thank you, Vice Chair Harrington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Turning next to the Operations Committee and Chair Bernadette Dorsett. Wow.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Tice. So 2 points to cover for the Operations Committee. The first one is in your board book and starts on around page 72, and that's going to be a housing fee proposal, and that will be done by Mr. Anaz. And then after the housing rate proposal, which we'll need to take a vote, we'll go on to a financial update. So everyone has gone through this, I think, individually and also covered at the board meeting. We're going to go back to the proposal, which again is on page 72 of your board book. Anaz, are you there?
Yes.
Perfect.
Good morning. Trustee Whitley, with your approval, based on the conversation in the pre-meeting on Friday, I would like to start with the financial updates because of the feedback we received, and then move to that housing proposal, if that's okay with you.
That's fair. My fault. Yes.
I believe the agenda was drafted and sent before that Friday meeting. So I will go back to the housing proposal right after a few slides on the financial updates based on the questions received and the conversation from the last board meeting. So good morning, everyone. On the financial updates, here we go. So on the financial updates, I will talk about our forecast for this current year. But before I do so, I want to just cover an overview based on some of the feedback and questions received in talking about the progress and challenges that the university has navigated through and continue to navigate through in the last few years. And when you look at the financial health and financial soundness of the university, really there are two aspects of it. Number one is the operational side, which is our processes and our controls. And number two is our financial health. And it boils down to really our revenue and expenses and how are we balanced? Do we have a deficit or surplus at the end of the year? So on the first one, on the operational function and controls, the best way really to gauge that aspect of our financial health is really our audits. And our financial statements audit is the tip of the iceberg that shows some of the challenges that we have been experiencing and the progress that has been made. So this chart really summarizes the findings from fiscal year 2019 to the latest one that was presented by CLA at the last board meeting.
Anas, can I interrupt for a minute? I'm not able to see anything. Is everyone else seeing a screen share?
Yes, I can see.
Okay. If it's only me, keep going.
All right. So what you can see there is from fiscal year 19 to 23, the number, but also the qualitative aspects of the findings. So the red ones are material weakness. The yellow, orange are significant deficiencies. The gray is non-applicable. The green is what you want to see, which is the result was. And as you can see here, we have decreased the number of findings as of the last fiscal year 23, but most importantly, the quality or the severeness of the findings has gone down drastically. So it's a qualitative and quantitative improvement. And what I mean by that is some of the chronic repeated findings that we have been seeing, like cash reconciliation, continuing disclosure, which is submitting our financial statements on time, which is the deadline of the November 27th, procurement and travel cards, and payroll accrual are all issues that have been resolved. So we still have, as was shared with the board, the financial reporting, which we are working on and still making progress that I will talk to. And then we have two entry issues, which is the OPED and the revenue recognition. So how did we get here in terms of progress? So we looked at the three different aspects that we acted on, especially in the last couple of years, which is structuring our internal controls. This is something that we talked about, I think 2 years ago, which is starting a monthly reconciliation and closing process with a quarterly close. The card reconciliation, as you know, the P-card travel card has been severe issue for the last few years. And the team here has a process now that every month they are doing a review of any outstanding expense reports and acting based on the policy that if you have outstanding that don't meet the deadline, you will receive what we call an administrative violation notice, which we have 3 levels on those. We have hired new staff. We have trained staff. We'll continue to do that. And we're trying to create stability for our analysts to have a growth path so they're not leaving us to seek professional growth. And also the third one, which is including and using technology, like the transition through ACH, using Banner, which is our ERP, as much as possible, and timely implementation of new requirements when it comes to GASB. This is a work in progress. As I have shared with some of you, we continue to clean up and strengthen some old practices. We are also working on today's work that we have and also working on the future in terms of improvement to help streamline our processes. So that's on the operational internal control side. On the financial health, I thought that the best way to show you some of the challenges at a macro level that we have been dealing with in terms of university in the last few years. So I went back to 2019, and that was the day or the year where we took a loan from the foundation as a university of the 7.3 million. And then I went forward to just see what has happened. And the one thing that you see there is that we were able to infuse some of the COVID funding throughout the years, and that's the gray bluish part of those bar charts to just show you how much of the COVID one-time money went to help not just deal with unusual one-time COVID expenses, make up for some of the lost revenue, but also help us close that systemic gap that I have been talking about. And that gap that has been created with, like I said before, the lack of increase of our revenue, tuition, housing, meals, with the pressure from the AR discounting, and most importantly, the inflationary pressures that we have seen in the last 3 to 4 years. And then it takes you to the fiscal year 24, which is the 7.7 million task that I will talk about in my forecast. And that's the task that was coming in as a gap that we started the year with. So this chart really is just to show you that as much as COVID funds helped with the one-time and ongoing systemic, there is still the need for us to create a revenue increases as we review the expenses to create at least a break-even point for our resources to cover our expenses. What we did here is we went from a macro level to more of a micro level. So we are zooming in to look at the student level. And what we did here is we didn't take in consideration any other resources like federal, states, and so forth. We just looked at expenses per students per FTE, which is a full-time equivalent, and the revenue driven per student FTE, i.e. tuition, fee, and auxiliary mainly. So if you look at this, which is not unusual for higher ed, especially now with the inflationary pressures, every institution is talking about it, meaning that from your core business, the revenues that you are bringing from your students are not enough to cover your cost per student. And that's what you see the gap. Just for fiscal year 23, we were looking probably at $8,400, $8,900 gap. What we did here based on input from Trustee Ridgway is we added the state subsidy. So the gap has narrowed. So your gap has gone down from the 8,900 for this fiscal year to roughly about 4,000 some. I'm sorry, maybe about 6,000, 5,000 some. But it's still there. And that's the gap that you either increase the light blue, which is the revenue, try to decrease your expenses, or infuse new revenues. Most institutions have an endowment. So there is an ongoing pull down of endowment to help subsidize the operation, especially that you have this imbalance in revenue per student. Or in some cases, it's a combination of endowments and a generous subsidy from the states. And some of our counterpart HBCUs, especially in North Carolina, even in Maryland, there are system schools where they are receiving state subsidies based on headcounts, and it even goes down to the type of headcounts that you are catering to, STEM versus non-STEM, undergrad versus grad, and so forth. So for those of you who are familiar with the school system here and the district and how they are funded, it's similar to that, where if your enrollment fluctuates, your financial subsidies from the state fluctuate. We don't see that. So we can double our enrollment tomorrow, and the state will still give us the 1% unless there is a major increase in the revenue forecasted by the state.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Am I right in assuming that our financial health is not based on revenue received from students?
Correct. That if you take just the revenue received from students versus the cost per student, it's not balanced. There is a deficit per student.
So my question is, I hope I asked this question clearly to make my point. What percentage of revenue derived from students is a part of our total budget?
It's like what you see there per capita is 21,000 to 27,000. I will show you the overall budget for this year, and
okay,
it is about 156 million, 160 if you look on the expense side. What's coming from the students around 120 some million. It's driven by the core business. So it's about 3/4, roughly.
Honest, I have a question.
Yes.
Can you give me two numbers? One, for fiscal year 2023, what is the student enrollment? What is the base student enrollment? What's the number? And then I'd like the number of the projected enrollment and number of students for 2024.
Uh,
I have it 6218 for FY23 and 6400 and some change for FY24.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Yeah, and now I just want to go back to Dr. Saunders' comment, which I think is a little bit of an overlay. What you see here with respect to per student FTE revenue and expenses is not all that inconsistent from most universities in the country. So that is to say that most universities don't fully subsidize their students based on the revenue they get from those students. It always requires some combination of subsidy, endowment, or increased pricing initiatives. So this is not unusual for most higher education institutions in the country, and certainly none that are HBCUs.
Gotcha. And I guess the point of my question is, accepting that student revenue represents only a percentage of our overall budget and financial health. I'm just trying to figure out what other components of the budget do we calculate in terms of determining or establishing our financial health for this year and the next fiscal year, and what it means for fiscal planning for ongoing years.
yes, and I will get to that in 1 second.
Good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Trustee Norman, just to clarify the FTE concept here. So if you try to do the math, so we have the headcounts, but also we have the FTE, the full-time equivalent. So there is a formula and a process to calculate that based on the iPad, which is, for example, if you have 2 part-timers, they may be calculated as 1 for the purpose of this exercise. So just in case you're trying to do the math and you are short, that could be the reason. If that makes sense.
Let me follow up with that. You know, over the past year or so, we've been the recipients of some gifts and that sort of thing. When you put the revenues together, do you include those gifts and the you know, the gifts that we've received? I mean, you know, I'm against, you know, using one-time money to cover forever cost. I really don't believe in that, because you know, the clock is ticking when you do that. But the point I'm making is when you calculate revenues, you know, what kind of things go into that number, and I'm also trying to understand, as we increase enrollment, I mean, we're going from 6218 to 64, which isn't a big increase in these 2 fiscal years. You know, what effect does the increase in enrollment have on these numbers? Not just the revenue part of it, but you know, the other costs that go with the student.
So good question. So the latter question we will answer with the preparation of fiscal year 25, because we take that in consideration as driver on the revenue side, but also on the expense side, especially on the meals and housing. So those are variable costs. It starts with my colleague, Mr. Boyle, on the forecasting. It goes down per program, and then there is a formula, an Excel spreadsheet that will give us the revenues, but also will help us with the costs, because there are contractual obligations, especially on the meal, that we have to take in consideration as we are growing the headcounts. On your first one, in terms of gifts, we do include it, and there is a placeholder for the foundation supports, which includes both direct and indirect gift. However, we do only include the portion that's helping with the operation. So if the gift grants is designated, for example, for research, for scholarship, and so forth, it does not come to play for this exercise.
Sure. Well, my question was directed at unrestricted. You know, I understand if the donor has a restriction on the grant or the gift, we have to abide by that. But I was just talking about unrestricted gifts. In my question, I wasn't clear about that. Let me just ask the president one question, Tony. do these numbers and this pattern and this trend, if you will, have any effect on whether or not we're still going towards 10,000?
Does it have any effect? Not
I mean, have you
necessarily.
changed policies or anything about how
No,
much you're going to grow enrollment?
No, I haven't. But to Anas's point, it is really about the proportion, the student type that we are trying to acquire. So to your point about as you acquire more students, you get revenue, but you also get expenses. It always depends on the type of student you're getting. The online student, for example, is less expensive than one that is hybrid. The same is true for international. So how you grow the proportions of students that make up that 10,000 is important. And effectively, over time, that's how you'll be able to increase your operating margin.
Okay. Do you have, just a side question, you may not know the answer to this right now, but do you have any kind of idea of what fiscal year we're likely to reach 10,000?
We have anticipated FY 30.
FY 30?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You got it.
So the second part of my presentation, and in answering some of the questions from the last board meeting, is just a forecast on fiscal year 24 now that we closed Q3. So we did a deep dive on revenue expected and expenses expected in this last fiscal year to forecast what our end position will be as of 6/30. Just to refresh your memory, the board has approved a budget of about 156 million. 0.8 back in June 29th of 23. If you look at the budget that was approved, and if you recall on the revenue side, and this will answer some of the questions about what other sources that we put in there. These are some of the assumptions. We have booked or forecasted to book 156.8 million. On the expense side, if you remember, there was a challenge of about 7.7 million. I call it 8 million for easy math, which has created an obligation or a mandate to us as management to solve that 7.7 million, reduce it as much as possible with a combination of expense management and or increasing the revenue to cover it. So the best way to think about it is that we started the budget year forecasting 156.8 million in revenue and about 164 million worth of expenses, with that caveat to solve the 7.7 million that's due to the merit aid, which is our institutional scholarship that we didn't budget for. So with that in mind,
I have a question.
yes.
I'm sorry, can you go back to that slide? So if you look at the bottom numbers, the total revenue and the total expenses, the 156 million, it looks like we have a balanced budget, but explain to me, how do we figure in the minus 7 million? I mean, do we in fact have a balanced budget?
When it was approved by the board, there was a caveat because of our institutional aid. So we counted, that's the merit aid, 18.5, but we only had about 10 million worth of room. So we put a task in there for 7.7 million. So directly to your question, it is not balanced based on that task because it's something that we are working toward covering, the merit aid. So it is 166 in revenue, 156 in revenue with 164 million in expense. And I will show you how we have resolved most of that task to bring it to as balanced as possible.
Nas, can you explain very briefly what merit aid is?
Yes. So merit aid is any scholarship that it has different names. So merit aid, allowance, scholarship, institutional aid, but it boils down to our booked revenue that don't cash out, don't translate to cash because the university has provided the student with some kind of financial assistance. And when you look at it, you have in it the academic assistance, you have also the athletic assistance, and you all have some smaller buckets of employees and the band, which is in their communication department. So those are the four buckets that make up the 18.5 million. The best way to think about it is if you look at the 81 million on the revenue and top, you should delete from it, from the get-go, 18.5 million, because it's not going to translate to revenues. Instead of doing a net in there, we keep it on the expense, which is practice in higher ed for budgeting, so you can keep an eye on it. So, but it's the same impact. You put it as negative on the revenue, positive on the expense, is the same impact.
So part to that question. So the success we've had in retention and graduation, some of that can be linked to merit aid, I would suspect. Is that fair to say there's a correlation there?
Correct, and I will invite the president or Mr. Boyle to speak.
And if I can ask a
Yeah.
question before Dr. Allen and Mr. Boyle. So does that mean we gave out too much merit aid?
Yeah, so
And I'll ask the question and then I'll just listen to the response. We'll listen to the responses.
Okay. Do you want me to answer that one in terms of just the finances? So what I have done is 3 years ago, we budgeted with the gross, just from a financial standpoint, and then I'll let Mr. Boyle talk to the on-the-ground application of merit aid, which is not unusual in higher ed, and we are probably in the middle to bottom in terms of percentages. All what I did is start putting the merit aid in the expense so you can see it. And when we started, we basically had a task of 18 million because we didn't budget for it. Throughout the last 3 years, we have decreased that task to 7.6 million. So every time we increased the revenue, I didn't spend it all. I took some of it and directed to help with this issue that we had. So for example, year one, we budgeted 6 million. So the task was 14 million negative. This current year, we budgeted 10 million. So the task is 7.6 million. I'm hoping that every year, because we cannot solve it in 1 year, we can diverse some of the revenues to help with the merit aid budget issue.
Yeah, just to Dr. Saunders' point, on the scholarship buy box, we have for some time now went out and been very aggressive in attracting students, quality students, by providing more scholarship opportunities. That has put pressure on the budget, to your point, for sure. We just last year decided we would decrease that buy box going forward here. Some of it has to do with the Inspire Scholarship, which gives us some relief. But the other has to do particularly with what we think we're going to be able to get in reducing what we think is an appropriate merit aid box. So yes, we've been aggressive probably over the last decade in that regard, and we're just bringing that back now.
Dr. Saunders, does that prompt anything else from you?
No, but I just want to say, I mean, this discussion is very, very important, I think, for me, and very, very enlightening, you know, in terms of making, you know, a decision, you know, regarding, you know, the motion, regarding, you know, the budget and the increase in, you know, housing. And I just want to say that getting all of the numbers for me that are necessary to make a decision, getting all the numbers is very, very important. And thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Just if we take it a little further than what you have seen, which is June, and where we are right now. So these are two boxes that show you where we started. So on the revenue side, we had the 156.8. On the expense side, 156.8 plus the mandate of the 7, which makes it 164.5. On the revenue side, this is again a forecast, and we are striving to close the gap even further as we still have a couple of months. So on the revenue side, we are forecasting a plus 2.8 million on the revenue, all said and done, at the end of June. As of last week, it could be better as we are advancing toward the deadline of 6:30. On the expense side, so if you look at it, we started the expense management as of January. We have slowed down a little bit our requisition and purchase orders. So we are anticipating a reduction of 2.4 million. So if you take the 2.4 million and you add the 2.8 million on revenue, we are expecting that gap to close from 7.7 million to 2.5 million as of 6/30. And again, this is a forecast as of today, and we are trying to be conservative with the caveat that there may be other resources that could help close that gap even further.
Honest, I have another question on that. In terms of closing the gap and reducing this deficit, are you planning to take other actions? Are there cuts being considered in expenses to get this gap down to not just to the number you have, 2.8, but to some number lower in the future? How are we going to have some kind of cuts in expenses? I don't know what expenses, but some expenses with the school to get the gap down so that we're closer to a balanced budget.
Trustee Griffiths, so let me just go back before Nas answers. Remember that the projected gap was 7.8, as you might imagine. We've cut that gap fairly significantly, and at a point in time here on April 15th, we wanted to give you the picture of what it looks like to June 30. That doesn't mean we're stopping. So the expense management exercises we put in place, we actually put them in place in January and are continuing that road. Expect that we will get some additional savings on the expense side, potentially some additional revenues on the revenue side, and try to close that gap as much as possible. We just wanted to give you this picture based on the last board meeting of what it looked like at this point in time.
Okay.
Thank you. Following through on Board Member Griffiths' question, how does our efforts to recoup money that is owed us in terms of tuition and other fees figure into?
Dr. Saunders, we're gonna have a full discussion about that. So let's defer that.
Oh, yes. Okay. All right.
We're gonna have a full discussion about that, and also about what's actually collected kind of per annum.
Okay.
And then what happens to what we collect. Okay.
Very good. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
So the second part of the presentation, as Trustee Whitley alluded to, is the housing rate proposal. And this is a presentation that I believe I have shared with all the trustees. So it hasn't changed really significantly since then, but I will go through it just as a refresher. So what we did during this exercise, which was a part of a revenue committee that President Allen has tasked me to chair, that starts at late, I think, beginning October of this year. And just to give you a little bit of history here. So last year, when we identified the margin issue, we started with the tuition. And if you recall, in December, not this past December, the one before that, when the board had a retreat in downtown, I presented the tuition proposal, but I also emphasized that while reviewing the tuition trends with the McKinsey team, they identified that our housing and other fees have not changed drastically. So we started with the tuition with understanding that we will defer the housing review and even the meal review to this fiscal year. So when we started this exercise in October, just focusing on the different revenues, the one that came up a little bit, a lot to the top was the housing one. And we discovered that our housing has stayed flat, exception for our P3, since 2016. While you can see the trends for market rates as published by HUD, the federal government, in Delaware as a state, in Kent County, but also the inflation increases. What we also did is looked from 16 to 22 of how other universities have treated the housing increases. And as you can see, we looked at regional and local, like UD, Salisbury University, but also looked at HBCUs that we consider as comps. And except for South Carolina State, which is a system school heavily subsidized by state, and there are other system schools here, the lowest increases have been 9%, and the highest has been 41%, with an average of anywhere between 15 and 20% is what we have seen in this cohort. And you can see where UD has stayed flat during that same time period. So with that in mind, there's two variable, and like I shared with you, talking to our consultants, Preston Hollow and Provident, that provided the board with a presentation back in December retreat. They recommended, well, they didn't recommend, but when they looked at our finances and our housing, they basically came up with a gap of 15 to 20% at where we should be if we wanted to do a bond deal right now with the market the way it is. So with that in mind, what we are suggesting is a pricing proposal of 8% for most of our stock, 5% year 2, 3% and 3% year 3 and 4, with some cohorts changes based on variables that are really outside of that inflationary explanation. And what I mean by that is, for example, courtyard. The residents, because of the full kitchen and so forth, they don't have obligation to contract with us. And then, so that's ultimately for a meal plan, which can cost anywhere from $5,000 to $7,000. So we want to make up for that revenue with a 25% increase. And then the other two, which amount to about 200 rooms out of 3,300 rooms. These are changes based on review of the stock that was acquired by Wesley and converting some of the double that are not efficient being used as double to singles and bringing those singles to a price that we are charging students right now for singles based on the market demand and the desirability of some of these rooms. So on the finance side of it, what it will look like. So based on our revenue, total revenue, which is about 26.7% million with Tubman and about 20 million if you exclude Tubman, the P3. We are forecasting a 2.5 million increase on year 1, 1.1 in year 2, and 750,000 based on year 3 and 4. This is just an average. So we are expecting for about 70% of our university-owned inventory, they will see an increase of anywhere between $200 and $300 a semester for the next academic year. So if you take that, and we took Warren Franklin, Weiner Tower as really the average that fit within that interval there, they have a base rate right now of $7,500 a year. That base rate has been the same since 2016. If we apply the 8%, that 7,500 will increase to 8,000, which is about $250 semester increase. If we did just a cost of living adjustment annually since from 16 to 24, as you can see there, we will be at 8,700 for 2%, 9,500 for 3%, and above 10,000 for a 4%. So the point here is that the 8%, it's still not making up for cost of living adjustment for the years, but that was our way to stagger this increase and taking into consideration our mission and the cost burden on our students. So this summarizes the rate proposal, and I will pause in here for any questions and for the proposed resolution review.
So Anas, this is John Allen. If I can ask a question, when you showed the slide that showed the other HBCUs and as well as University of Delaware, when they started increasing, because it seems like everyone was kind of lagging on increasing housing rates, and then everybody started moving, but we stayed the same. When those schools had their initial rate increase, were they in that 30% range when they did their first initial hit to the students? Do you know? I'm just trying to really get a feeling for, how folks may respond, to 25%. Although what we're saying is we're bringing the rates up to what our other rates are, particularly the singles, what they currently are. So we're really just kind of right sizing. But what was do you know what those averages were for that first year, those increases when they started raising them?
I don't know. Something we can find
If
that.
you don't know, if you don't have it, that's fine. I
Right.
was just wondering. That's
We
okay.
took the picture from 16 up. What I can tell you is that most of them have seen a slowdown of increases during COVID, taking into consideration the post. But in aggregate compounding, that's where we saw the 9 to 41% with an average of 15 to 20%. Just on the singles and the 25% and 30%, because I know it sounds high. So those represent 4% of our stock. And these are historical misalignments that we didn't do when we acquired Wesley College. And some of them were used as doubles that we're using as singles. Some of them we use as double, but they are not to be used as double based on what our students are desiring and where they're looking for. So all what we are doing in that case is we are bringing the same rate that we are charging right here in the village for 1 bedroom. And we are eliminating some doubles, replacing them with singles, but charging them the ongoing university current rates with a slight increase if that 8% goes through.
Okay. And the doubles that we were using just were not conducive to having 2 people in a room. That's correct.
Correct, based on my visit and based on the experts' feedback. And I believe we have some of them. We have Shaniqua Harris, who is ultimately in charge of housing here with us. And yes, so we took their feedback. They drove this for 2 years, and they are the expert that I relied on to really have a comprehensive exercise here, knowing that this is just a 4% of our stock that we are talking about.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Anas, I mean, you based that in one segment on 95% occupancy rate. Do you have any data? You don't have to share it today, but do we have reporting to show what the occupancy rate is for each facility? Are we at the 95% today?
As average, we are around that 95%, but the ones that we are requesting a change, like Zimmerman and Momberg, we are experiencing anywhere from 50 to 60% because students don't want to be double. They either don't want to take it or they take it and move out. And that's why we are increasing it, moving it to single to address that. But as aggregate, we are around that percentage. And we do have it by whole that I can share with you. It's something that actually is published weekly on Monday by our URPA.
It's published, you said we can get access to it?
It is published by our business data team that I can share with you, right?
Yeah, I'll be interested in seeing it. Maybe you don't have to do it today, but after the meeting, offline, take a peek at it.
Sure.
This is Dr. Mishu, and on the same chart that you're showing, the very last line, the Momberg first floor, am I reading it right that you intend to or proposing to increase the current room rate by 55% for next year?
Correct. So these are units that are increasing to meet, to just bring them up to our singles that we have right now in the village on the price and reducing the capacity for us from 20 plus bed to 10 beds. And this is a section that the housing staff has recommended to make a grad student section. And just, I know we are short on time, but I think it's worth to look at this chart quickly here. So if you look at the Momberg 1 bedroom that we just talked about, we are moving it from 8,000 to 12,000 and the Zimmerman from 9,000 to 12,000. But if you look at the village, your one currently, 1 bedroom, 1 bath, our students are already paying us 12,768. So we are not taking them outside of what we are charging currently for that type of accommodation. We're just bringing up to where they should be based on the usage that we feel is more appropriate.
I have a question. If we execute this plan, to what extent will the deficit be decreased?
For next year, this will bring us 2.5 million in additional revenues.
Dr. Saunders, this has no impact on our current fiscal.
Well, I guess the reason I'm asking the question is if this overall over the 5-year period doesn't resolve the deficit question, will we need to continue to raise housing rates after the 5-year period of this plan?
So it's a very complicated question because you have many variables. So you have the expense side of it, and then on the revenue, you have the tuition increases, you have the housing, you have the meals, and then you have other subsidies that we may need to seek and be aggressive on, i.e. the state subsidy. And these are things that we are preparing a list, and we will work through and come back to you in June as part of fiscal year 25. We have started that process. We have not talked about it at a higher level. We are planning to do this after we know what we have to work with once this proposal is hopefully adopted. But please keep in mind that there are some constraints that you will hear about, i.e. the union agreements and some of the payments we have to make. You have a deficit that we are carrying from this year. You have the healthcare challenge that has been identified by the governor, which may represent $3 million increase for us. So all these, that's why I said it's a complicated question. So as much ground as we make on the revenue by increasing these variables, there are also expenses that have been increasing that we need to take into consideration. And we are hoping that we can bring that picture together for you and the rest of the board at the June meeting.
Thank you.
So Dr. Saunders, just to add on to Anas's point, so outside of what we're able to do with respect to pricing, with respect to our students, it really comes down to the subsidies from the state, our private fundraising, particularly as it relates to unrestricted revenue, any dollars we're able to get from overhead costs with respect to research, and then any one-time big gifts that might come in as a result. I would say my emphasis right now, because I know one-time money is one-time money, is really making sure that we are right-sized with the state of Delaware and with respect to our subsidy. We believe that, as I've noted, that we still have about $10 to $15 million that we should get from the state per annum to right-size where we are, where we should be going forward here. So, and that'll come down to obviously my role as president, but also advocacy from all members of the board and university stakeholders as we move forward.
Okay. So, Anas, I'm sorry. What?
Go ahead. Can I ask my question? Anas, the chart that you laid out that went out 4 years, shouldn't it be going out 5 or maybe even 6 years?
What we did is we tried to mimic the tuition increase, which was the 4 years, and also based on that. But it's a rolling exercise. So as we forecast the increase of this tuition, as Dr. Sanders has mentioned, we have some headwinds, and we are hoping that we can take care of them with some of these increases, plus some of the items that Dr. Allen has mentioned. But it's a rolling exercise, and we feel this 4 years is really making up for the compounding effect that we missed out on the 8 years, but doing it in a responsible way and not overcorrecting in 1 year. So think of this 4 years as our way to make up the ground, but taking into consideration the burden on our students and spreading it on the 4 years rather than 1 year correction.
Okay. So this coming up semester in September of 2024, a student and their parents are going to be facing 2 increases. One is a tuition increase, and one is a room rate increase if they need that service. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, I'll hold off right now. I have other questions, but thank you. Mm-hmm.
And please note that on the tuition increase, we have taken into consideration, especially for the in-state, and our rates for in-state and percentage using Inspire has gone up above 70%, that will not have an impact on that cohort, which is the main cohorts that Inspire will take care of that increase, which is a 6% increase already approved by the board. I can invite Mr. Boyle to explain the stacking of subsidies, well, because once you take Inspire, then you have the Pell Grant if they are eligible. So we went through that exercise and looked at the cost of attendance, especially for our in-state, which is roughly about 22,000. If they are staying with us, if they are commuters, then that will reduce drastically by 8,000 or so. And then when you start stacking some of these resources as Inspire and the federal subsidy, it quickly can boil down to probably about 3,000 to nothing a year. Mr. Boyle, maybe you can chime in or correct me if I misspoke.
Good morning, everyone. Again, no, you did not misspeak. For those who are in-state students and Inspire recipients, they get all of their tuition covered. What we did within the factor was for persons who are intelligent or smart young people who are also eligible for the Pell Grant, FSUOG, and other subsidies on campus, we figured out that to be $3,000 and a lot less in many instances where we did that for those that are in-state students here within Delaware, for those who are recipients of the Inspire Scholarship. So certainly they get right about almost $8,000 in the Pell Grant. They get it about $7,900. And then FSUOG and other grants that they have within there, if they're going to live on campus, those funding in many instances are covered by potential aid that they'll get or grants that they'll get to attend the institution. For students who may want to go beyond that, obviously there are other options that they can also take as well too to fund the cost of this. But that was a huge part of our conversations in terms of ensuring that we had not only the dollars that are there, then what's the impact on our students and all from both on the tuition side, obviously that's covered for Inspire scholars, and then the remainder of it that we have for scholars that are also receiving the Pell and FCOG as well.
Okay.
Tony, can you tell me what percentage of our current enrollment is in-state?
It's about 47% of our kids are in-state students, and we're over by about 53% for out-of-state students.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And can you also tell me what percentage of those are getting the Inspire right now?
We're almost close to 1,200.
1,200 students.
Yeah, at the undergrad level. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Hey,
And it's only
Trustee
400.
Bashir,
Yes.
Trustee Bashir, just as a trend though, because I think that may be what you're asking, the incoming freshmen of fall 24, those who were in-state students, 79% of them were Inspire scholars.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
So-
But
Go ahead.
it's still only 47% of our total enrollment are in-state students. Is that
Yeah,
what
and,
you're
that,
saying?
and Tony, yes, and Tony's counting for total enrollment. If you took out international, that percentage would go up.
Is there a cap on the number of Inspire students and budget each year?
No.
Say it again, Trustee Ridgway, I'm sorry.
Yeah, is there a cap on the number of Inspire students in the state budget?
No, there is not at the moment, and I want to be very thoughtful about that at the moment. We literally go to the Department of Education every year, ask for our increase based on our projections, and they include it in their budget. They have continued to do that for the last 2 years, and we don't see any headwinds with respect to that at the moment. I think they all understand the tuition expectation we want to get to for in-state students in the 4-year period, and they're planning appropriately against it.
But there's not been any conversation, has there, about possibly limiting or capping the number of students?
There's not.
They have committed to finding. I mean, if you were to have a great increase in number of in-state students who were eligible, the state has committed to funding them, right? Or
yes,
finding
they have.
the funds for them.
Yes, they have. And
Okay.
the only cap I say is to date, we have had no issue, and we've continued to add significant increases each year.
Okay.
And we have briefed the governor office based on the trustee input last year when we had the 4-year plan for tuition increases, and they were comfortable with it because of the Inspire impact.
Honest, I had one other question. How do we sell this? Is there going to be a piece of literature that goes out from DSU to explain what the pricing is for the upcoming semester in 2024 in September? How are we going to, how's that going to happen?
Yeah, so I'm happy to take that. Just like last year, we did a couple of things. First of all, we had a town hall, university-wide town hall expressing the new increases. We'll do that again. We have to publish the rates, so we'll obviously do that. We obviously go through all the other channels, e-news, student emails, e-billing statements, and then the final piece is the stakeholder inquiry. So we made overtures to the governor's office and several legislators of consequence, and also went to the press, noting that we're still the best value in higher education in Delaware and likely in the region, and got them a sense of why we were doing this, what the pressures were, and how we were adapting accordingly. And Trustee Griffiths will do that same cadence as we move into this initiative as well.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yep.
I have a question, and this question is about being proactive so that we're not in this situation, in the future. But am I right in thinking that had we raised housing rates earlier, we may not be in the situation in which we find ourselves? And does that mean, given Trustee Griffith's question, that we may have to increase housing rates after year 4?
So I'm going to let Anas answer this question just to give you a perspective of if we were regularly reviewing our increases as it relates to tuition and housing on an ongoing basis. That'll give you a sense of where we think we would have been. My only caveat there is we all would have paused during COVID. So take that as two and a half years where nobody would have done anything. But with that, Anas, go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
Let me follow up just so it's clear what my question was based on. And I certainly appreciate what you said, Dr. Saunders. But, having put 4 through college, I have a parent's perspective. The parents are looking at any piece of information they can get their hands on to know what the cost of college for my young one is going to be. And so that's why hearing all of this, it sounds like not only is it changing, but, is a parent going to have enough information to say, hey, I'm sending my son or my daughter to DSU, and I have the information here in this piece of literature? You answered part of my question about the literature and what it's going to say, but I guess that's what, that's the audience, I think, or at least a big part of the audience we're trying to sell to, the parents that have to foot the bills on these things.
And I think the extent to which we're able to sell it to the parents, I mean, we need to be able to do that too. And I'm in your court.
I agree.
Because I think people who come to Delaware State do get the more than they get a lot. But I think parents are willing, or maybe more willing, to accept an increase if we say to them, this is the deal, and this is what's going on, and why. I mean, we're not trying to soak you just to get money, but these are some realities that need to be taken into account in terms of educating your child. And I think this discussion, as far as I'm concerned, is giving me insights and information that I need to make the vote that we're moving towards, and being able to talk to the public about the decision that we make.
Trustee,
may I say something?
Oh, go ahead, Trustee Michelle. Yep.
Well, Tony, you might want to speak first. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I appreciate all of those comments and obviously have a lot of sensitivity to them. The only thing I would add here, only 2 things I would add here are the following. Very few universities propose multi-year increases at one time. They do it 1 year at a time. So I feel pretty positive in that respect, that at least we're giving our parents and students an opportunity to see what the picture before them holds, at least from a 4-year standpoint. And then, as all of you know, particularly Trustee Saunders and Trustee Michoud, anybody else in the higher education business, it really does come down to the packaging. There is a sticker price, and then there's the real price. And once Tony does this packaging, when you take Inspire, when you take Pell, when you take the other grants, it's still, like I said, this is still the best value in the region, in my view. And I feel good about that, and feel like once we get over this 4-year period, we can take things in more reasonable paces like cost of a living adjustments and the like. But right now, we've had to make up for lost time. Sorry, Trustee Michelle.
I guess, and what I'm hearing from Trustee Griffith and Sanders is pretty much where I was coming from the very beginning, and I'm still right where I was in regards to I just can't in good consciousness approve increasing all of these fees for the next 4 years because it's the same families who started out, or who will have started out 4 years ago, who are bearing this burden. And I just can't see how we can consciously put all of this, especially when we're talking about things that we didn't do or things we could have done in the past. We're putting that on these kids. And I think, as you mentioned before, some other things need to be put in place and really need to aggressively be done. You mentioned them. You said infusing new revenue streams. And I haven't seen anybody yet really dig in and talk about what are those new revenue streams you're going after. I read the article about, the most recent agreements that we've had with Barbados and the amount of money that will bring in. And we're doing a fine job with our international programs and revenues. But we have got to do even more than just increase and put all of this on our students' back. I haven't heard you really talk about what steps you have taken in terms of decreasing your expenses, which was another thing that you said you're going to do. And I know that you've been down and will continue to ask the state for increased support from them, which is certainly what we need to do. But I just cannot, in good conscience, see us asking the same families for the next 4 years to endure these increases for the next 4 years. Their revenues, their incomes have not increased to this extent. And I don't think it's fair. I think if anything, you need to stretch it out more, or as I said, find some other ways to generate the revenue that you say you need. And I'm still right there. That's all I need to say.
Coach Collick, please.
Yeah, I just quickly want to say we all know that we've been given individuals opportunities for a long time, and at some point, how do we get people to understand that as we relates to paying their bills? And I haven't heard much about that because, we certainly can't continue to not have people to pay their bills. And what are we doing, or what can we do? Because certainly that's, we're going to go to buy the car, but we don't pay for it. And so I think it's something that we have to look at and try to find a way. I just want to say that.
Did I see another question from a board member? Yeah, I just want to simply say that everyone's sentiments are appreciated. I thank every board member for the thoughtfulness that has gone into this issue. And, it boils down for me an issue of shared sacrifice that I am not so sure that we get around sharing the sacrifice. When you look at the exponential growth in employment costs, when you look at the exponential growth in benefits costs, when you look at the exponential growth in what it costs us to enter into new collective bargaining agreements, when you look at the increase in, I guess it's a matter of inflation, and I'll speak to it. He's the economics expert. The cost of doing everything we do comes with an increase exponentially, particularly post-COVID. I'm not sure what happened to the world post-COVID, but it changed employment, it changed benefits, and it changed the cost of goods and services. And for those things, the people on this call have no control. This call is about controlling the things that we can control. against the backdrop of economic forces that are bearing down on us on a daily basis. This institution is 133, 134 years old. The folks that created the school for colored folks during Reconstruction, fortunately, didn't have the challenges that we do in 2024. We have to operate this institution at this point like we are a startup. It is every year exponentially changing in light year pace. The cost, the business model, and we're having the right discussion. That's all. That's what I firmly believe. We're having the right and responsible discussions. And for that, I thank each and every one of them and the administration for sure for their management and transparency. That's all I wanted to say. And again, thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you.
Can I give you an amen on that?
Yeah, say amen, somebody. In light of everything that's been said, I have two questions.
Yes, ma'am.
One is, what are the answers to Trustee Mishu's questions? And number two is, let's suppose the vote is no.
Well, I would. I'm sorry, and I don't want to do this, but I'd rather take the vote than have a hypothetical about what it's going to be. Frankly.
Okay. Well, let me be a lawyer and ask the question differently. I'll rephrase it. What alternatives are there to this plan?
Well, let me say this as a chair, which is which is an honor and a privilege, because you're asking a question, and I'm assuming in part that question's directed at the administration, but we are the fiduciaries,
right?
So that question's on us,
right?
So my answer is, this is a constant endeavor for us. As we're it's a matter of public and private partners, in addition to what we take in from students, because the bottom line is this: when this thing pencils out, ultimately, it costs us more than we charge to do this. That part ain't complicated. So when we're talking about the quote unquote shortfalls or gaps, to keep it simple, that's a shared responsibility. And actually, I think we are leaders in that responsibility in figuring out how to close the gap. So that's a question that's going to be put to us every single day when we wake up in this role as trustees and as an administration. So there's no silver bullet. It's not. I think time has proven that austerity doesn't do it alone, right? Meaning, I'm going to reduce my expenses and get myself out of a budget issue. It's certainly, and I believe Ridgway said it earlier, a combination of revenue and expense management, which we're already endeavoring to do. And I think you heard from the president when he says, we're going to the state and making it clear, first of all, what the economic impact of Delaware State University is to the state. And I think everybody's clear about that. And Dr. Mishu can certainly tell you the impact that Delaware State University is to Kent County, more specific. So that's how we're doing it. We're continuing to make that argument that Delaware State University is the best value proposition in higher education in this region. And as it relates to the state, the economic impact that we have on this state and have had for 133, 134 years kind of speaks for itself. Though every year we have to make that case. And I don't think there's anyone more eloquent in making that case than our president. So those are the things we're doing. And obviously the private partners. I mean, and that's our role too, trying to expand who we bring into the fold. Look, none of us grew up in Martha's Vineyard, I don't think. And so we understand the families, we understand. I mean, under $40,000 median income. That's why I call it shared sacrifice. I wish I could pay the bill. And we all try. We all try. We all give, you know, and that's the other thing. Alumni giving. I mean, it's a healthy mix of everything. To Dr. Mashu's question, it's a healthy mix of everything. Every single dollar going toward the shortfall that is when you don't have a $2 billion endowment. When you're like a Yale that pulls down, their business model is pulling down $25 million a year from an endowment. That ain't a good business model, by the way. And University of Delaware is having a similar challenge, and they've got $1 billion endowment. So it's an ongoing discussion that actually we're the drivers of. That's my thought, Dr. Saunders. But and I don't want to offend you, but I didn't want to presuppose that the vote was going to be no.
Chairman,
I just wanted to say, make a comment, Chairman Tice. Well, two comments. First,
Please.
This is a difficult subject, and the executive leadership team had just as hard a time as you all, as we all are having right now, as a body. So, but the second thing is that I just, you know, as much as I talked about at the executive leadership team meeting, the stress of this on the families, I do know that we cannot stay here and be responsible as well. And we just can't. We knowing what we know about the financial state, we have not moved forward on housing costs up until this time. We just can't stay stagnant. The expenses continue to grow, and we can't stay here and be responsible as well. So how we message that and how we message that to the parents is very important, but we do have to move. Now, where we move to, you know, we can disagree or agree on that, but we do have to move. We cannot stay here and be responsible as well.
Any other comments before we move to a
No,
vote?
I would agree with what Trustee Harrington just said, and I think I shared it in the executive leadership meeting as well. That, you know, Delmarva Power went through the same types of situations with the Delaware Public Service Commission, where, you know, we tried to hold rates low as possible for our customers, so there wasn't a stress on the, you know, low income families, et cetera. But there does come a time where you're going to have to catch up. And, you know, we ended up having to go to the commission and say we needed a 27% rate increase. And we know how that goes. But the point being made is that we cannot sit back and not do anything. You know, we know that there's going to be an impact on families. We know that. But how do we minimize that impact the most? And I think the administration has put together a plan that helps us to get there. And when we're talking about, you know, 55% increase in Moundburg, we have to remember we're just talking about bringing up to a single rate that we already have. So we can't sit back and not do anything. But because then we're not being fiduciaries if we sit here and not do anything. So those are my comments.
So to that point, I'm sorry.
Yeah, may I add?
Please.
It just seems like this is probably the most complex decision we made as a board in a while. And and it seems like there's still questions out there that's dear in heart. I mean, I'll be perfectly honest. I'm struggling with this internally and being tugged both sides, every comment, every statement. I'm just thinking here, is there a hybrid approach? And not saying that we won't approve the whole thing, but, you know, what alternatives is there? I mean, do you move forward with years 1 through 2 and revisit it and then approve the others, or approve it with approving year 1 and 2 and based on certain performance, we move to 4 and 5? I mean, seriously, the model that we have today is a failing model in the sense of revenue. as far as, you know, when you have a student operating that deficit, we have to take some steps. I certainly understand the concerns of the impact, particularly when you look at the state of the press today, when every time you pick up the paper, you have institutions that are having fiscal distress, and you have other institutions that rates are going through the roof. So we're in a tough position. The school's in a tough position. I'm just sitting here thinking that here's what's a win-win for us all. That's my thought.
And I just need to say that I am not in any way suggesting that we not move. That would be totally irresponsible on my part. But I'm suggesting that we find some other ways other than what has been proposed in terms of moving to get to where we need to get to. And I know that some of that is going to take longer than others, but I just have not heard anybody present any other alternatives. And so, I mean, even as John just said, maybe we only approve this for 1 or 2 years instead of 4, while we assess how we change throughout those 2 years. But I think we're not looking at other alternatives, or if we are, I just haven't heard them. I just haven't heard them. So.
Understood. Did I hear you, Bernadette?
Yes, I was just going to ask Chairman Tice, would it be appropriate to bring this to a vote? I think we've heard a comprehensive discussion. Our board trustees have shared their comments, and I was just going to say, is it appropriate now to bring it to a vote?
I believe so.
Okay. So with that, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the increasing housing rates through 2028 that were shown on the prior chart by Mr. Anaz, starting with year 1 being full year 2025, going through year 4, 2028.
Second. Oh, I move to approve the housing rates as presented.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Any?
Who was that?
Any further questions?
Jocelyn.
Okay, Jocelyn, second.
Jocelyn.
And what I'd like to do, hold on for one moment. Ms. Stoner, are you there? Ms. Stoner?
I am here.
All right. I'd like to have a voice vote. I'm sorry, a roll call vote. Okay. Can you call each board member so that we can vote on the issue?
Okay. Okay, I'll go down the list in order.
Very good.
Trustee Bernadette Dorsey Watley.
In favor.
Trustee Bill Pollock.
Yes.
Trustee Debbie Harrington.
Yes.
Trustee Marlene Saunders.
No.
Trustee Jocelyn Stewart.
In favor.
Trustee John Allen.
Yes.
Trustee John Ridgway.
I abstain.
Trustee Norman Griffiths.
Yes.
Trustee and Chair Leroy Tice.
Yes.
Trustee Dr. Wilma Michoud.
No.
Is that all the board members, Ms. Stoner?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, board members, for the vote. The motion carries. Before I go into the announcements, Ms. Stoner, I believe there was the public comment. Is that person available?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we do have joining us today Ms. Rennie Brown.
Okay. Ms. Brown, are you with us?
Yes, I am. But subsequent to my request to the board secretary, I had also sent an email asking for it to be withdrawn.
Understood. Thank you, ma'am. Moving on. Can everyone please?
I think that might be Ms. Brown. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Moving on to the announcements really quickly. Spring red and white football game, April 20. Commencement Friday, May 10. Hopefully we can have a full slate of trustees. Committee meetings day 1, June 6th, athletics, student affairs, etc. Committee meetings day 2, June 13th, audit and ERM, etc. Full board meeting June 20, and the HBCU Philanthropy Symposium. This is June 30 through July 3rd. Next, I think we have an executive session indicated on the agenda. May we have a motion to move into executive session, please?
Motion to move into executive session.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All, okay, the motion carries. We will move into executive session. Those necessary parties, please stay on, and those who are not, thank you for your attendance to this point. The collective bargaining agreements.
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Second.
Very good. All in favor?
Are you going to ask for a question?
Pardon me? Do you have a question, ma'am?
Are you going Am I to understand that the fiscal impacts in the last column will be figured into the housing rates that were discussed earlier?
Dr. Saunders, it'd be figured into the overall budget. It's a better
Thank
way
you.
to think. Yeah.
Are there any more questions? Hearing none. All in favor of the board approval of the CBAs for the term that we considered, and I believe it's through 2026 fiscal year. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any against?
Abstain.
Very good. The motion carries. Thank you. May I have a motion to go back into executive session?
Mr. Chair, I move that we go back into executive session at this time.
Second.
I'm sorry. That was,
Sorry. Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Michoud?
no.
And second by Trustee Griffiths. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We're moving back into executive session.
Second.
Very good. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any against? Very good. The motion with respect to promotion and tenure passes. Thank you, Vice Chair Harrington.
You're welcome.
Is there anything else on anyone's conscience that we need to we discuss before we adjourn?
Chairman Tice, I just want to make sure the board is up to speed on my role as a standing member of the Democratic Convention Committee, which is a part of my ongoing relationship with the administration. It really is just me serving as one of the party leaders with respect to the Democratic Convention in Chicago. There are not many additional responsibilities, but I want to make sure you were aware in case it was in the press.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Yes. Did I see another hand?
My hand was up. And
Please.
I just wanted to ask, and I don't know how the agenda is formed, but if there could be on the agenda updates regarding what we have talked about today in terms of housing rates, for example, how we are progressing with expenses and income, so that we have some of how we're moving towards settling this.
You will hear from the CFO at every meeting for sure on our progress, and obviously, I mean progress on the revenue and expense side. I think I can speak for Anas when I say that he will continue to keep us abreast of any progress and any risks.
Okay.
Because we will hold the administration accountable in that respect.
Thank you.
Very good. Very good. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
To adjourn.
Second.
Very good. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Good,
Thank
good
you.
week.
Okay.
Yep.